This week on Wild Talk, join me, Steve Hamilton, and my partner in crime, Kaylee Klassen, as we chat wildfire. We're joined by friend of the show, Byron Wolf from Wolf Hunting Adventures, talking about what happened in his guide territory this past summer.
It actually took out our main camp, and we had some caches around there that we didn't lose anything of major value, but we definitely lost some stuff.
And John Davies, wildfire management specialist for over 30 years in British Columbia.
I think what is important to recognize is that we're never going to live without fire. We have to learn to live with fire.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds, the Wild TV Canada app, and these fine sponsors.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of Wild Talk. I'm your host, Steve Hamilton, and I'm joined by my co-host, Kaylee Klassen. So it's hunting season. I'm stoked to be quite literally taking off in just a few days for a hunt. So how's things in your world, Kaylee? You getting prepared for anything?
Oh my gosh, am I ever. I leave tomorrow for elk camp, and we just happen to have a moose draw in the same spot. So we are off to the races. We head out tomorrow, and I could not be more excited. How about you? You leave in a couple days as well.
I do. We're flying into northwest BC to a high mountain lake, and yeah, we're chasing caribou, moose, sheep, goats, whatever happens to be out there. We got the tags for it, but going with some good friends, and just happy to be outside, and filling the freezer is a bonus. So yeah, I just want to dive right into this week's episode, to be honest, because this is a topic that is affecting everyone, not only here in Canada, but throughout the continent and throughout the world. We got an ongoing summer of wildfire smoke that's blanketed literally everywhere from the Northwest Territories all the way through the Maritimes and down into the southern USA. So our guest this week is John Davies. John is a wildfire management specialist who lives here in British Columbia, right in the heart of the Okanagan, where fires are continuing to rage right now. So welcome, John. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve and Kaylee. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you.
So, John, you've been involved for something like 30 some odd years in wildfires, and going back to even when they were called forest fires. So let's get into your background a little bit. What sparked your interest in becoming what you do today?
Actually, it was strictly by accident and ego that I got into firefighting. I was a student at SFU, and I was looking to do something other than tree planting. And I went by the student center, and I saw this advertisement for firefighting, a poster, because back then we had posters, not internet. And I picked up this pamphlet that was by the poster, and it talked about this program for firefighting. And at the back it said, we recruit the best of the best and the creme de la creme. And where that, and I said, well, if I'm going to go firefighting, I want to be on the best team. And so I put this application in, and I ended up getting picked 6 out of 6 for that year, so I squeaked in, and that was 1993. And I worked for the government on the helicopter rappel cruise called Rapattack for 10 summers. It was 6 or 7 on the ground, and then the last couple were in the air in the helicopter. Instead of rappelling out, I was kicking people out and their equipment and doing recce's and providing air support. I did that till 2002, and then I left because I had an opportunity to do some prescribed burning with a consultant, and so I jumped out of the service, and I went into that, and that slowly trickled into 2003 fire season, which was huge in BC. It prompted a provincial review, which ended in a report called the Philman Report, which basically told the government they should be doing things differently and more community protection and burning and kind of changing their approach to fires. And I started my own company and continued doing prescribed burning and got into community protection and fuel management, ecosystem restoration, habitat restoration, and I did that until February this year. So I had my own business for 20 years. I worked all over BC. I worked up in both territories, and also did a stint over in Indonesia. And then just recently I joined another local company called Foresight Consultants, and that's where I sit right now.
So when you said Rap Attack, that kind of caught my interest there. And how did that thing end up on your lap? Because that seems a little specialized.
It was difficult to get into because you you had to be under a certain weight, so 170 pounds with street clothes. And back then I didn't have the dad bod, so I was well under that. And whereas a lot of people in their 20s may not have been. And so yeah, I made the application, I got in, and I was certainly it projected me into this career that I'm in and this passion for fire. I have no regrets about it. I mostly have no regrets about it. It got me to where I am, and I'm really appreciative of the opportunity.
Yeah, that's quite the career trajectory you've been on, and you've no doubt got some crazy stories that we could get into in a little bit. But I really want to dig into essentially how we got to where we're at now. But that's gonna be some storytelling, I'd imagine. So that's gonna have to wait till we are back from our break here after a few words from our sponsors. All right, everybody, we're back, and we've been talking with John Davies, a wildland fire management specialist, and we're going to dig into the meat of why you guys have tuned into this. So, this is something that's been rolling around in my brain for a heck of a long time now. And John, I'm going to put it right to you in point blank. Is it me? Is it us on this call? Or have wildfire's been getting worse over the last 30 years?
It's not you, Steve. Yeah, it's I would say certainly in the last 7 years. 2017 was a really big jump. Before 2017, the biggest year for hectares burned was 1958, and so we go back a long way to getting to that record. And so we smashed it in 2017. And what was unique about 2017 was not just the number of fires in the area burned, but where those fires were. They were right up against communities and remote recreation areas, power lines, roads, and they were large. So you would have a really large fire that on multiple fronts would be impacting different communities. They were so big. And for listeners that may not be very familiar with BC, it's we settled in river valleys and along lakes, and those are separated by mountains, and you have to go quite a ways around sometimes to get from one to the other. But these fires would just go up and over the slope, and now you'd have two fire fronts and two communities impacted. And so we shattered that 1958 record by a lot. And then, not wanting to be outdone by ourselves, 2018 came along and we broke our 2017 record immediately. There was a report in there, Abbott Chapman report, that was very similar to the Philman report that again looked at what we were doing. And then a couple of years kind of reprieve of just kind of average. And then 2021 came along. And again, we had a huge year. And similarly to 2017, we had a lot of interface fires impacting communities. And and then fast forward to this year, and we've absolutely shattered our 2018, 2021 records. As of the end of or middle of August 17th, when I looked, was the latest data I could find. When we were at 1,800 fires total for the year, we were at 1.6 million hectares burnt. And as of today, when I checked before this call, we were at 2,150 fires and 3 more weeks of burning. So I suspect that when the stats get updated, we'll be close to that 2 million. I would bet we're breaking that by the time this fire season ends, which actually goes till March 31st, 2024, because it goes by the fiscal year, not the season.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so it has gotten worse, and not only has the impact on communities gotten worse, but we are also experiencing fire intensities and fire severities that are unhistorical. They're atypical of what we've seen in this, in that last 30 years that I've been involved. Yeah, so we're seeing a lot more degradation of ecosystems and habitat. And that results in these ecosystems not rebounding as quickly or even at all to what they were previously. And part of that is that we have excluded fire from the landscape for so long by being really good at putting out fires and by managing our forests for specific values that demand we put those fires out, that we have created basically a powder keg out there of excessive fuel or unnatural fuel levels in the ecosystems. And that is what is contributing to these intense fires. And then you throw climate change on top of that, and 2023.
Yeah, you touched on Kelowna. It's kind of ironic that was almost 20 years to the day that the major fire started in Kelowna. And I remember driving through Kelowna in 2003 in the summer when that fire kicked off. And that was the first fire I honestly remember paying attention to and going, wait a minute. Because you hear about them. Growing up, you talked about Smokey the Bear and all that, and only you can prevent forest fires. And that was the first one that really stuck in my head. So that fire in 2003, we lost something like 200 homes. And I did a report on that fire when I was in university, and not from a firefighting perspective, but in the way it was handled publicly from a communications point of view. And as you mentioned, we've had fires since. We've had Fort Mac in 2016 and Northern Alberta raging right now in the Muskeg. And I know you're in Northern Alberta right now, Kaylee. So how does that area look? Are people still on edge there?
Oh my gosh. Everyone throughout the summers is always on edge. Everybody that I know up here has a bag packed and ready, whether it's hidden in their basement, in their garage. Everyone has a get out of the house, now we need to leave bag, just prepared and ready. Everyone's always on edge, especially up here in Northern Alberta. We are dealing with the smoke every day. It's part of our everyday life here this summer in 2023.
And honestly, here, every day, save for a couple of weeks this past summer, we've been dealing with smoke advisories, and
Absolutely.
thankfully the kids aren't outside at school because they're dealing with this smoke in their lungs. But we're just getting started with this conversation with John Davies about wildfires, so we'll be right back with Wild Talk after some more words from our sponsors. And we're back with more Wild Talk, and John has his friend Hunter next to him. Hunter's popping in to say hello, so everybody say hello to Hunter.
Hi, Hunter.
Anyway, we've been chatting a lot about wildfires and how we got where we are, and I just want to continue down that path. So we had Elephant Hill here that John touched on real briefly in 2017. That was 200,000 hectares or something, destroyed more than 100 homes. And I read a report that came out recently, and so it was over something like $1 billion a year in ongoing losses, still from a fire that's 6 years ago. 2 years ago, we lost an entire town here in BC. Lytton was absolutely leveled, and tragically, two people lost their lives in that. This year, we have the Donnie Creek fire up in Fort St. John, Fort Nelson area, and that's now the largest wildfire in BC history, something like 500,000 hectares. I heard another article today that over 40 homes have been lost so far in the Pemberton area, in what's essentially a rainforest, in areas that we don't normally see fires to this scale and this intensity. Yellowknife up in the territories, fully evacuated. Shuswap, Kelowna, good buddy of mine, as you know, John, lost everything in that fire up there. When I first reached out to you about doing this episode, you said that's an area we told them to burn 2 years ago, and now it's gone up under tragic circumstances. So we've lost infrastructure, we've lost forests, we've lost habitat. We sadly lost the lives of citizens and firefighters again this year, and that's just BC and Alberta. So I'm going to throw this one right into your lap, John. How did we get here?
What I mentioned earlier with the exclusion of fire in our ecosystems and putting all fires out, uh, to BC and Alberta and the boreal forest right across Canada, they're forests that have fire as that has a natural role within the ecosystem. So they would, a fire would occur at different timelines called historical natural fire regimes. So up in the boreal, they would occur less often, but they would be bigger. And down in the South Okanagan, where I am, you would have more frequent fires, and because they occurred more frequently, they would burn up fuel and keep stands in a more open and fuel-free condition or low fuel condition, and so they would be less intense fires. And all of this was done naturally, but it was also exacerbated and by First Nation burning. So First Nations would do a lot of burning, and this is well documented through both oral history with elders and bands, and even looking at charcoal deposits and stuff in archaeological sites. And they would burn for specific reasons, for habitat, to protect themselves, for berry flush, for producing areas that they wanted to basically practice agriculture in. And when for a number of reasons that ended up stopping, we put them on reservations and took away basically their culture so that they couldn't burn. And then we started putting values on forests. We wanted timber, we wanted to save it. We started ranching. So for cows are really great at eating grass. And so, when they graze that grass down, it's no longer an available fuel source, so you don't get that fire spread. We built highways, we built roads, we built towns, so we interrupt not only the start or the ignition of fires on landscapes by humans. We put them out very fast, but when they do start, we have just interrupted their ability to flow across the landscape because we have these features in place. Yeah. And so, over the last 100 years of doing everything we can to put out almost every single fire, we have, and then also planting trees very, very close together because we want to harvest them 100 years from now. We have created ecosystems that are unhealthy, that we have too many trees occupying sites that weren't intended to. Through climate change, we're starting to, those valley bottom sites are getting, less productive for trees. The grasslands are actually, starting to creep up. So those trees are dying. Put in too many trees and really extreme environmental conditions, and you end up with the opportunity for forest health issues. Mm-hmm. And we saw that with the mountain pine beetle that raced through the boreal and then came right down, southern BC. And so, that was a decade, 13 years ago. Well, anything we didn't salvage is now on the ground, and all this regen has come up through it, and so you have this volatile fuel source of this well-seasoned dead pine trees with spruce trees and balsams and more pine growing above it, and so that's highly volatile. And then even stands that we planted 50, 60 years ago that are now more or less mature, they're so dense that they're just continuous fuel horizontally, and so we've created this landscape of continuous fuel in both a horizontal continuity and often in vertical continuity. Whereas in somewhere in the southern half of the province, it would have been more patchy. It would have been more patchwork stuff where these fires that we either allowed to burn or burned on their own or were intentionally lit to restore habitat or maintain habitat, no longer occurred, and so now we just have this carpet of fuel right across the landscape, and that's why we're having these huge fires.
With that in mind, I want to continue this conversation when we come back with more Wild Talk after some words from our sponsors. And we're back continuing our chat with John Davies about wildfires. So this has been absolutely fascinating for me. And before we shot to this last break, we're starting to talk about the fuel load. And you briefly touched on the pine beetle here, John. And I know when I firsthand, when I moved to PG about 15 years ago and I took a drive north to start learning the Forest Service roads, it was just a sea of absolute red. And I knew what I was looking at. I was essentially looking at a fire waiting to happen. Been pretty lucky so far that we haven't had anything really close to PG, but a few years ago we had a couple ragers about an hour west of here. We got a couple really big ones south of Vanderhoof area, and it's in those areas that have been just ravaged by the pine beetle and built up that fuel load. So what I'm gleaming out of this conversation is that fires aren't a bad thing when they're controlled. And as you said, they've been used since the dawn of time. And you touched on that we got too good at fighting them. And can you elaborate on what that means? Like how to me that you see it on social media all the time. People are like, oh, all they need to do is send in the Martin Mars, and one bomb worth of water will put it out. Why can't they do that now? So it kind of to me goes hand in hand with the fuel load buildup. So how does that kind of fall
into our problem that we're at now, John?
Yeah, I think what is important to recognize is that we're never going to live without fire. We have to learn to live with fire, and we have to try and live with it on our terms. We're always going to have these big fires that just get out of control because they just historically have in certain areas, and that's natural. But fire is good when it occurs under its historical conditions. And right now we don't have historical conditions in BC with regards to fuel or ecosystem health. And so in order for us to try and get out of this and get back to it, we actually have to integrate fire back into our forest management policies and management and planning and regulations and act. That because for so long that we've pushed it out of this and tried to suppress it and keep it from not only occurring, which we should with human caused ignitions. We can't do anything about lightning. Those fires are always going to occur. But the stupid human fires we should try and not have. And then the human caused fires we have should be the ones that we light ourselves under very specific conditions, so that we can introduce fire back onto the landscape to fulfill all the roles that it does as a natural disturbance trend.
Yeah, I know, seeing just even growing up and driving through ranchland area, that one of the best things farmers ever did was they'd set their grass on fire, and you'd drive by 2 weeks later, it's nothing but green growth. Seen that a few times driving through Williams Lake after those big fires, where you drove through and there was nothing, and then weeks later it was green shoots, and a month later it was just repopulating itself, and that makes such great habitat for wildlife. You see deer in areas you don't normally see them. Bears are returning, moose, and all the ungulates, and the trickle down effect. Everything that's relies on that area for food and forage. And another big thing that people don't seem to think of when it comes to forest management and fuel management is those predator sightlines. It's no shock to people that hunt and recreate out in the bush that there's a predator explosion in certain areas, and those predators can move quite easily through the blowdown and the buildup, and the ungulates can't. So when we get a surface fire that's going through and burning quite hot, it removes a lot of that blowdown and the predator sightlines. So it's not a bad thing, as you said, when it's controlled and at the right time of year and under strict conditions. And I've never lived through a forest fire, wildfire, like you guys are down in the Okanagan right now, where I've been on evacuation alert and orders. So I can only imagine what it goes through with your thought process when those type of things come through. So for somebody who is in your line of work and does what you do and knows the value of fire, how do you kind of reconcile that, and how would you explain it to somebody who doesn't know? Just get a quick answer on that before we go to commercial.
That's a big missing piece with fire management is public education, because we have spent since 1910 or something with the big burn, and then 1950s with Smokey the Bear telling people, the public, that all fire is bad, and we certainly have a big re-education process ahead of us to turn this around. And 2017, 2018, 21, and 23 are great opportunities, to engage in that public education on fire.
That's a great start to a conversation. I do want to continue after our break. How do we start to re-educate the public when it comes to wildfire management and fuel load? We'll be right back with more Wild Talk after this. Welcome back, everybody, to Wild Talk. This conversation, pardon the pun, has been spicy and hot the way I knew it would be. So to wrap this up, I want to dig into the social license of fire. You see it on social media all the time that I don't want this in my backyard. There's too much smoke in the off season. But when we're not controlling fire in our own terms, we're running into situations like we've got for the last 6-7 years, where we're losing communities, we're losing lives, we're losing infrastructure, and all the trickle down effect from that. So, John, in your opinion, what kind of public education campaign can we do to try and change that mindset to, hey, fire under controlled circumstances on our terms is a good thing?
Yeah, challenging for sure. I think that it can be as simple as starting out in schools and educating the kids, so that when they graduate and move out, that they're the ones that are have had some exposure to it. We need to educate the ones that have grown up with Smokey the Bear, or re-educate. And I think that since 2017, 2018 in BC, I think the BC Wildfire Service has done a good job at providing more information during the fire season through videos or social media, etc., just on what they're actually doing on the fire line. Because I think people just think we send out a bunch of fire trucks, and those guys come back and then they get ready for their calendar shoot and whatnot. And really, you have a lot of young men and women, and they are kids. They're in their early 20s that are out on the fire line in really stressful situations that never get seen, right? And so, being able to take that and provide pictures from on the fire line to the public, I think that really helps to hit home and to win over, some of those some people that may not, align with governments in general, or even with what they're seeing happening out in the landscape. Because if they don't see planes flying, they don't see helicopters in the air, they don't think anything's happening. But all aircraft do, and this is what part of the education is support the ground crews. So they're not putting the fire out. All they're doing is buying some time for the people on the crew on the ground to actually get their shovels and plaskis and hoses and put the fire out. And so I think that Wildfire Service has done a good job in the last several years of ramping up that education through social media and videos. And I think we need to spend time in the winter trying to get the public's attention, because as soon as fire season ends, the irons cool very quickly, and they move on to other issues and concerns. And trying to keep that momentum going from fire season, in between the fire seasons, is problematic. It's difficult. And so I think there needs to be something put in place where we can try and stay top of mind, coming out of the fire season, through the winter, and then really ramping up prior to the fire season through big public information campaigns. And we also used to educate the public on this aspect of fire versus no fire and smoke versus no smoke. We're past the time that we're not going to have any fires and we're not going to have any smoke. We need to try and work to have fire on our terms where we want it, and create the smoke that we can control through short term by prescribed burning and the use of fire in the shoulder seasons, than just trying to put out all fires and not have any smoke, because that's not an option.
Yeah, I think you summed it up there beautifully, John. Is we need this on our terms, and I know personally, I this summer especially, I wake up in the morning and I open the window, the curtains, because don't sleep with the window open because of the way the winds could change overnight, and you end up with a face full of smoke at 3 in the morning. And the first thing you do is go, "Oh, good, it's not smoky today." Then you open the window and, oh, there it is, right? There's just that residual smell of smoke and the hacking in the lungs.
Yeah.
And I personally, I know that I would rather have, as John said, smoke and fire on my terms. And is a little bit of off-season smoke worth it? Absolutely, I think so. Kaylee, I know you up in Alberta, you're probably feeling the same thing.
Oh yeah, it's coming from the west, it's coming from the north, it's coming from everywhere, and we are dealing with it every day up here. Every day
Yeah.
on my drive to work, it's like you can barely see 200 yards in front of you. It is that smoky on the highway. It has been brutal this summer, and we've probably had a handful of days that have been like minimal smoke, but every other day other than that, it has been unbearable. It's been tough to deal with, absolutely.
Yeah.
Given lots of people
Exactly.
headaches, and there's health effects from it too.
Absolutely. You know, there's starting to be a problem when there's website developers developing smoke apps that you can forecast your week out when how the wind is doing to see where the smoke is going to be that day or those couple of days for you. Imagine going camping. Like I know going camping when I was a kid. I'm not going to say how long ago that was because I'll date myself. But you didn't worry about wildfire smoke then. You didn't worry about going into an alert area where there could potentially be a fire the other side of the mountain. And that's all that seems to be happening nowadays. So I'd like to thank you, John, for an absolutely information filled chat with us. And thanks to Kaylee for joining me again. You've been a great co host and look forward to doing more with you. And yeah, thanks once again, everybody, for tuning into Wild Talk. We'll see you next time. All right, and we are back with more Wild Talk. We're joined in this segment by our good friend Byron Wolf. Most of you will know him, but for those that don't, Byron, let's hear a little bit about you.
Full-time outfitter and guide. My family and I run a pretty decent outfit, I'd say. We're mostly known for our wolf hunts, but we also do moose, bear, and whitetail.
Yes. Speaking of whitetail, you smacked an absolute cranker the other day, and a huge congrats on that. I saw that on your social media. I'm like, yep, that is the one dreams are made of. So, yeah, congrats again from us.
Thank you very much.
Double drop tines. It was beautiful.
Oh, yeah, just coming right off the back there. Just amazing. So this episode, we're talking about wildfires. And I know you've been hit by them before. And I remember seeing on your social media earlier this past May, it sparked up May 3rd or something it was. So you being an outfitter in that area, what did you see on the ground as it happened, and what was your reaction to it?
The first reaction was, "Oh, they'll have this out by tomorrow," but that definitely wasn't the case. That fire is still burning today. It was kind of mind blowing as to what do we do next, because it had cut off access to our camp. It was just one thing after another.
So you didn't have clients in there at the time. You were getting ready to put them in.
Right. We were on our second bait line. We'd already had one full line baited, doing the second one. We had one more bait to set up that day, and then we were going back to camp. And I could see smoke billowing, and I said to one of the guides, I said, "Oh, it looks like BC's on fire." And I thought, wait, that looks closer than BC. So I jumped on Facebook and the Town of Rainbow Lake page, and yeah, the fire started right on the outskirts of the town. So
Yeah, it definitely looked like it got going and got going quick. Just yeah, your social media posts were basically the eyes and ears on the ground for people that weren't there, and it really seemed to get going and going fast. Is that something usual for that area, or has this area ever been hit before?
that well, I mean, high level burnt in the high level fire, the Chuckhead Creek fire burnt. I want to say 5 years ago now, and it was the same big. I mean, I think it was over 260,000 hectares itself. Um, so yeah, I mean, the way our forests are in Alberta, it's just one big giant ball of fuel. So once it gets started, if there's no moisture around or falling from the sky, it's just going to keep burning.
That's that's unreal. Those pictures and the videos you were sharing were I don't even know how to say it. They're awe inspiring. And I'd like to get a little bit more into that when we come back from this quick break.
Welcome back, everybody. We are joined today with Byron Wolf. We are talking about forest fires and how it affected his business. Byron, how did it affect your business? What came out of this?
So the first start of the fire, we were able to get back into our camp. We didn't pull anything down. We just hooked up to the equipment trailer, which thankfully I had enough tents and stuff left in the equipment trailer that I was able to pull all that out of there, and we set up a second camp. We were able to do 1 week out of that second camp, and on Hunter Change Day, we were evacuated with 15 minutes. Um, we went from broad daylight to dark at 6:30. I think it was 6:30 at night or in the evening. It went pitch black, looked like 2 in the morning. And the fire just about it didn't roll over our camp, but it was darn close.
Oh wow! I remember here in Prince George about 6 or 7 years ago, we had some fires that were out west, probably about an hour in a straight line if you were really driving at a good clip. And about 8 in the morning, 9 in the morning, the smoke rolled in and the lights turned on, and it was apocalyptic. So I we knew that fire was far enough away from us that we weren't in any danger. But as you said, that was quite close to your camp. So you lost any infrastructure at all?
I didn't lose any infrastructure on that fire. Now, like I said earlier, the fire's still burning uh, today, and another fire come in from the BC side, and it actually took out our main camp, and we had some caches around there that we didn't lose anything of major value, but we definitely lost some stuff.
So did you have to like delay clients coming in or any hunts like that?
We probably, I would say, postponed 6 bear hunts in total, which would be about 20%, I guess. And on our moose hunts this fall, we were only able to take 4 out of 14.
So it's been quite the financial hit to you due to this forest fire season, I guess. Then, eh?
Yeah, I mean it has been, but we'll get it back next year, I guess.
Yeah, you always seem to come out ahead on adversity, judging by your social media and our conversations. So what's next for you this winter? You said that you got something coming up that you're going to be able to come up with.
So we got some whitetail hunts here starting the 11th of November, and then as soon as they're done, we roll on to wolf hunts, which take us till the 20th of March. So we're busy now till spring.
Yeah, it's a busy sort of time of year for you, and we're almost done our chat with Byron Wolf. We'll be right back after these messages.
And we are back with Wild Talk with Byron Wolf. Byron, let's dig a little bit more into how the fires affected the wildlife, the landscape, and how do we get here?
According to my trail cameras, a lot of the areas that were on fire, burning slow, the wildlife, the bears mostly is what I was watching. They never even left. And it was days later, the fire was out, and those bears were still there and alive. And I've been told that, you know, on average, a fire will move 3 to 4 kilometers an hour, and the wildlife can outrun that, outmaneuver it. But when it gets really hot and it takes a big run and does 30 or 40 kilometers in an hour, that probably causes a lot of wildlife loss.
Oh yeah,
there.
I couldn't even imagine.
How did we get to this? How did we get to this point? I would say by putting fires out for the last 70 years is how we've got to this point. Mother Nature's way of rejuvenating itself is by burning itself. So every fire we put out just causes more and more fuel to be able to accumulate in the forest floor.
Absolutely. So you guys have the same sort of issues there in Alberta that we got here in British Columbia. Yeah, and you nailed it. We're too effective at fighting these wildfires. They get called in immediately in the age of social media and cell phones, and the initial attack does an incredible job of putting them out. And that almost is to the detriment of wildlife and habitat in certain areas. Yeah, in areas around Fort Mac and Kelowna, they got to hit them hard. Wherever there's deep infrastructure, they got to nail them hard. But in areas like rural northern Alberta and rural British Columbia, where there's no risk of infrastructure, you got to let them go.
And sorry to cut you off, but now they are doing that. And that fire that took out our camp in late September, that had been burning since the end of May, and just smoldering in pockets of muskeg and all that. And then it finally got enough fuel and wind that it caught a big ridge of timber and headed right towards our main camp. And actually, it wiped out probably four of our spike camps as well on its way to main camp.
As we get closer to ending this, we're gonna in a few seconds. Can you tell us a little bit about the habitat that was burning up there, about the muskeg and what happens when it gets into that?
So I can't explain how, but in the peat moss and the swamps, that fire can burn underground, and it's been recorded burning for a couple of years underground, and it can re-spark the next year if it's not dug up and put out in the wintertime.
So it really gets deep in there, and you hear about that. Oh, the fire, once it gets underground, it can go forever. And you saw that firsthand, because what are we, 4 months away, 5 months away almost from when that fire initially sparked up, that it ended up taking out some of your camps. That is absolutely crazy, Byron. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning into this episode of Wild Talk, and Byron, especially a huge thanks to you for joining us again. You're such a great friend of the show, and we'd love to have you back.
Anytime, guys. Anytime.
Wild Talk is brought to you by Trapper Gourds, the Wild TV Canada app, and these fine sponsors.